What's up, guys? Welcome to the Inu Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse, and today we have a special guest, Mr. Tony West from Americans for Prosperity. We're glad to have you, Tony. How's your day?
It's going really well. I'm glad to be here talking with you. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. So, Tony, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into politics and Americans for Prosperity?
Sure. Yeah. Well, for me personally, I think I was probably in high school when I really started being interested in politics. I was a sophomore during the 2004 presidential election, and that's the first time I can really remember being interested in what was going on in politics and our government. Probably around my junior year, I wanted to learn more about what the parties stood for, what did I think about different policy questions, and just learning about politics and government in general.
Nice. So, I know that you are the grassroots director for AFP. So can you tell us a little bit about what you do and what the organization does?
Yeah, absolutely. I work for the Georgia chapter of Americans for Prosperity. We're a national organization that has 36 state chapters. So the national staff will work on the federal policy issues and the federal work, and then me in Georgia, I work on the Georgia-related stuff. I've been with AFP over 3 years now. We're a nonpartisan advocacy organization, and we work to break down barriers that stand in the way of people realizing their potential. We think that by doing that, it's going to move our society towards one of mutual benefit, where people are going to succeed in life by helping other people improve their own lives. And we do that because we want a free society where people can achieve their American dream. You know, everybody's different, everybody's unique. So we hear the word American dream, and that can bring to mind different ideas in different people's heads. But that's going to mean something different to each and every person. And as an organization, we just want to make sure that the government, whether it be the federal government or the state government or maybe even a local government, doesn't intentionally or unintentionally erect barriers that make it harder for you to achieve your dreams. And so that means that when it comes to legislation and policy, we're going to advocate for bills that we feel like are going to help make us a freer country. And we're going to oppose legislation that we think will actually make it harder for people to achieve their dreams. When it comes to elections, I know when people think about politics, what usually comes to mind is elections. We aren't an elections organization per se, but in a limited way, we do get involved. For instance, we look out for policy champions all over the country. These are legislators that have taken the lead on issues that are important to us and have proposed legislation, fought for legislation, and just been leaders. And it's not just about their voting record, but that they are leading and trying to get others to follow them in ways that make our country freer and make us a more prosperous country. And in that case, we do, in those limited situations, endorse the candidacy of those people because of their policy positions, not because of their party. But that's a little bit about who we are. We're probably the largest grassroots organization on the right in the country. So it's a pretty fun job. It's a fun way to try and make a difference in our country, and you meet a lot of great people doing it.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. So I know I've worked with you guys before, but just to our audience out there, can you tell us a little bit about what you do exactly? Like, you guys do a little bit of phone banking and door knocking. Maybe you can explain.
Sure.
Like,
yeah, we do a lot of different things. Some of it comes into education wise. We want to help make people aware about what's going on. So we will publish legislative scorecards each year, which kind of highlight legislation that we found important or interesting, and we want people to be aware of how their legislators voted on that. But one thing that I think makes us really great as an organization is what you mentioned. The phone banking and the door knocking are tools to apply grassroots pressure on legislators to do the right thing. For instance, our state legislature here in Georgia meets approximately, I think it's they meet the first Tuesday in January, and they go through the end of March. Sometimes it spills over into April, and they'll have, approximately 1,000 different bills get introduced. Some good, some bad, some don't mean a lot. But a lot of times people are like, well, we can't make a difference. My legislator doesn't listen to me. They're just doing what a lobbyist is telling them to do, or their donors are telling them to do. But we try and flip that on its head. So here's an example. Let's say there's a bill that would expand school choice in our state. That's something that we're for at AFP. We are definitely in favor of expanding education freedom in the state. We don't think that a student's educational outcome should be determined by their zip code. We want to put that power in the family's hands, in the parents' hands, and give them more choice of where they go to school. So let's say there's a bill, let's call it House Bill number 1, that is up for discussion in a committee or on the House floor, you name it. It's going through the legislative process. Well, let's say that it gets introduced in the House Education Committee, and me or our state director is down at the Capitol and hears, well, the committee's having trouble deciding if they like the bill, if they're going to pass it out of committee and let it move on through the process. And let's say it's 4 against, 4 for, and there's one holdout. One vote, one House member hasn't decided. What we can do is we can put up a phone survey and contact people in a very efficient manner, contact voters in that House member's district, and ask them, hey, what do you think about school choice? What do you think about education freedom? Is this something you're for? Kind of let them know that bill is active in a committee, and that their House member is actually the one that gets to decide whether that bill is going to die or if that bill is going to move on and hopefully become law. And if they agree with us, we hit a button and can transfer them to their legislator's office, where they can speak directly to their staff or leave a voicemail. And the idea is that if we speak to enough people and we allow legislators to realize, wow, this is something my constituents want. This is, and that can make a difference. Legislators take a lot of things into mind when deciding how to vote. Sometimes it's just their personal beliefs. Sometimes it's what their colleagues are saying or doing. But a big important thing to them is what their constituents think.
Right.
So for us to be able to have the infrastructure and our awesome volunteers to help us contact constituents, contact voters, and let them know what's going on in Atlanta on a specific bill, and then use that grassroots pressure, it's grassroots lobbying, to get legislators to do the right thing. That's something that we can do on a whole host of different issues. And if we do it right, we can make a big difference, and we have in the past.
Yeah. So yeah, that's awesome. I really agree with the message that the Americans for Prosperity organization is pushing out there to get the grassroots mission and to help regular people be able to have that power to decide for themselves, basically what they want. So let's move on to our last question. What piece of advice, if any, would you give students today, say middle, high school students, even college students, regarding politics or just life in general?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would start off by saying, read a lot. Don't, as best you can, and it may be harder today with the way social media is, and there's so many different options to absorb information. But just try and read as much as you can. Usually, better sources of information are to be read, not to be listened to. And that's not to downplay podcasts, because we're on a podcast right now, and they're very useful. There are plenty of podcasts I listen to.
Right.
But I would just be wary of what some of the sources are out there online. There are so many bloggers and YouTubers out there that make money off of just getting people hyped up and angry about, the latest outrage in politics.
Yeah.
And that happens on the left and the right. It's not a partisan thing in the last 10 years or so. I mean, this is a phenomenon that's gone on for a while, but especially now that there's revenue to be made by clicks and by watches and views. It's gotten a lot worse, where the more outrageous thing that's said, the more the crazier thing gets the most views, therefore it gets the most money, therefore there's an incentive to kind of stretch the truth or to get people even more angry at each other, and a lot of times it's not fully truthful. So and you just see that more when it comes to videos and certain 60-second type things. Whereas if you read a book or an article, there's a lot of gray area. You kind of get both sides of an issue, and you may come down on one side and say, I agree with this position, but you're not super angry and sharing that on social media.
Yeah.
But I would just say that there's always been, less than stellar outlets and places to get your news, but I feel like it's really proliferated the last few years. So I would be careful about what you're reading. I'd say in the last 10 years, we've seen it now twice, in my personal opinion. I feel like we're seeing the, what's the word I'm looking for? Almost like the celebrity politician now. I feel like Obama was sort of a celebrity politician, and now Trump. He was a celebrity. He was on TV. He was a persona. He was a persona before he was ever a politician. And what bothers me, and I think a lot of people are gonna find this out sooner or later, and I think young people would be better to avoid it than have it happen to them. But this, like, I remember when Obama ran and was president, he could do no wrong in some people's eyes. Mm-hmm. Just factually things, he made a bad choice, or just arguably his positions, a year ago, maybe a person was totally against something, but now they're for it because Obama's for it. And we're seeing the same thing today, where because, President Trump in some people's eyes has become a celebrity, he can do no wrong. And that's a very dangerous thing. It's pretty un-American in my sense.
With everyone playing follow the leader, and especially nowadays, I also agree wholeheartedly that people are thinking less for themselves, and they just kind of follow what everyone else is doing. And yeah, like you said, that's very dangerous for society, definitely.
It seems like because of the celebrity factor, it seems like personality. It's almost like a cult of personality. It's like a person is what got someone interested in politics, when really it should be ideas and principles and protecting our liberties and our freedoms. That's what makes me want to be involved in politics. I really like a quote by Plato. He, at least it's attributed to Plato. He said, paraphrasing, one of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors. And that's just basically to say, government, there's always going to be a government. Who's in charge is up to everybody. But if smart people, if people of goodwill choose not to be involved, then someone is going to step forward and take the reins. And unfortunately, it's usually people with a lust for power, a lust for self-advancement are going to be the ones to do that if we're not vigilant. And so, we live in arguably the most prosperous nation ever. We live in 2018 is arguably the most prosperous time in human history. And that's not an accident. We take it for granted that, peace is just the normal. It's not. For most of human history, it's fighting and war and poverty. So we need to think about why we have such blessings that we have. And I'd argue that it's because of our Constitution enshrining liberties that the government should protect and not infringe, and limiting government to allow the free market to create the well-being and prosperity that we live in. So that's why I believe in being involved in politics and trying to find what is the good, what is best for the role of government and the role of government in our lives as individuals. So my thought would be, students, young people, read a lot, learn a lot, be a person of goodwill. We may disagree on one or two policies here or there, but if we're all coming to the table saying that, America is such a great country, we need to preserve what's great about it and improve upon it as we can, I think we're going to find a lot more things we agree on than we disagree on. And right now, to kind of bring it full circle to what I said in the beginning about, it seems like people in media, they only make money when we're at each other's throats. Well, it doesn't pay a lot if everybody's getting along and we can more or less agree on certain things. I think The Law by Frederick Bastiat, I think that's a must read for everybody, whether you're brand new to thinking about politics or you've done a little bit of reading and you kind of have an idea. It's a pretty good book that I'd recommend. Very, very small. It literally could probably read it in 2 hours.
All right. Yeah. So, thank you, Tony, for joining us today and providing all your insight about, politics and Americans for Prosperity. Thank you for your time and have a good night.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jesse. You have a good night as well.